The crystalline spires of the Nexithian royal palace caught the pale light of 3 moons, casting rainbow fractals across the polished floors as Princess Vera of Nexia sat in her private garden, fingers trailing through the luminescent water of the reflection pool. The gentle humming of her mobility chair's energy core provided a soothing backdrop to the evening solitude, a solitude that had become her constant companion. "Another suitor has withdrawn his petition, Your Highness," announced Taylor, her devoted attendant, approaching with careful steps across the garden's crystal pathways. The young woman's voice carried the weight of disappointment that had become all too familiar in the palace halls. Vyra didn't turn from the pool, her sightless eyes reflecting the dancing lights above. "Let me guess, Lord Cantros of the Outer Rim?" "Yes, Your Highness. His message cited scheduling conflicts with his trade routes." A bitter laugh escaped Vera's lips. Scheduling conflicts. How refreshingly honest. Usually they fabricate more elaborate excuses. She manipulated the neural controls of her hover chair with practiced grace, turning to face her attendant. "That makes 12 this cycle, doesn't it, Taylor? Your Highness, perhaps?" "Perhaps what?" "Perhaps I should accept that no one in the known galaxies wishes to bind themselves to a princess who cannot walk, cannot see, and whose only value lies in the political advantages her bloodline provides." Vera's voice carried no self-pity, only the sharp edge of frustrated intelligence. "I'm 24 cycles old, Taylor. In Nexithian society, I'm practically ancient for an unmarried royal." Taylor's silence spoke volumes. Both women knew the truth that neither would voice aloud. In a culture that prized physical perfection and the ability to commune directly with their planet's energy crystals through sight, Princess Vera was seen as fundamentally flawed. The sound of approaching footsteps on crystal interrupted their conversation. "Your Highness," called a palace guard, "the human medical delegation has arrived early. There was an accident during their approach. One of their shuttles suffered engine failure. They've requested immediate access to our medical facilities." Vera straightened in her chair, her diplomatic training taking precedence over personal disappointment. "Injuries?" "Unknown, Your Highness. The delegation leader specifically requested to speak with someone in medical authority." "The palace. Healers are attending the evening crystal ceremony." "Then we'll have to suffice," Vera decided, directing her chair toward the palace's medical wing. "Taylor, alert the healing chambers and request emergency protocols." The medical wing of the palace was a marvel of Nexithian technology, where bioluminescent healing crystals lined the walls in perfect symmetry, their soft glow providing both illumination and therapeutic energy. As Vera entered the main treatment chamber, her enhanced hearing caught the sound of labored breathing and hushed, urgent voices speaking in what she recognized as standard galactic common tongue. The fractures complicated by the crystalline shrapnel, a male voice was saying, his tone clinical but concerned. "I've stabilized the bleeding, but we need a sterile environment for extraction, and I'm not familiar with your planet's healing technology." "Excuse me," Vera announced her presence, causing several heads to turn in her direction. "I'm Princess Vera. I understand you require medical assistance?" A moment of surprised silence followed clearly. They hadn't expected royalty in the medical wing, much less royalty in a mobility chair. But one voice responded immediately, without hesitation or awkward pause. "Your Highness, I'm Marcus Chun, field medic with the Terran diplomatic corps. My colleagues suffered severe lacerations from crystal fragments during our emergency landing. I've provided first aid, but the wounds need proper treatment, and I'm unfamiliar with Nexithian medical protocols." Vera found herself intrigued by the human's directness. No stuttering, no obvious discomfort with her condition, no excessive formal deference. Just professional concern for his injured colleague. "May I examine the patient?" she asked, directing her chair closer. Of course, Your Highness. But I may be blind, Marcus Chun, but I've been trained in healing arts since childhood. Nexithian medical techniques rely heavily on energy sensing and manipulation. She positioned her chair beside the treatment table where an injured human lay unconscious. And you may be surprised to learn that psych isn't always necessary for healing. Marcus watched in fascination as Vera placed her hands just above the injured man's wounds, her fingers moving in intricate patterns. The healing crystals in the walls began to resonate, their glow intensifying in response to her movements. Remarkable, Marcus murmured, pulling out a small scanner to monitor his colleague's vital signs. The cellular regeneration rate is accelerating. How are you doing that? Energy manipulation, Vera explained, her concentration never wavering. All living things have energy patterns. I learned to read them through touch and intuition, since I cannot see the visual manifestations most healers rely upon. She paused, adjusting her technique. Your scanner, is it monitoring neural activity? Yes, among other things. Lieutenant Torres suffered a concussion along with the lacerations. I can help with that too, but I'll need your assistance. Human neural patterns are different from ours. Can you describe what your scanner is showing? For the next hour, Marcus and Vera worked together in perfect synchronization. He provided technical readouts and observations while she guided the healing energy with unprecedented precision. Their collaboration felt natural, effortless, as if they'd been working together for years rather than minutes. Incredible, Marcus said finally, as his colleague's vital signs stabilized completely. In human medicine, injuries like this would have required major surgery and weeks of recovery. But you've essentially reset his cellular structure to a pre-injury state. Vera allowed herself a small smile. And your monitoring equipment allowed me to be more precise than I've ever been. Usually, I have to rely on instinct alone. She turned toward him, her unseeing eyes somehow finding his face unerringly. You didn't hesitate to work with me. Why would I hesitate? You clearly know what you're doing. Most people see the chair, the blindness, and assume incompetence. Even our own healers sometimes question my abilities. Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying her face, the determined set of her jaw, the intelligence in her violet eyes despite their lack of sight, the graceful way she held herself despite her physical limitations. Their loss, he said simply. The simplicity of his response, delivered without condescension or pity, struck Vera like a physical blow. She couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken to her with such casual acceptance. Marcus, she said softly, would you join? Me for the evening meal? I find myself curious about human medical techniques, and it seems we work well together. I'd be honored, Your Highness. As they made their way through the palace corridors, Marcus walking at an easy pace beside her chair, Vera realized something had shifted in her world. For the first time in her life, she was with someone who saw her abilities before her disabilities, her mind before her body, her worth before her limitations. Tell me, she said as they entered her private dining chamber, where crystal candles cast dancing shadows across walls she would never see. What brought you to Nexithia? It's quite far from human space. Marcus helped himself to the offered seat across from her, noting how she moved with complete confidence in her own space, her fingers finding each utensil and dish with practiced ease. The Terran medical course has been studying bioregenerative healing techniques. Your people's ability to accelerate cellular repair is legendary. And now you've experienced it firsthand, Vera smiled, raising her glass in a toast. To unexpected collaborations. To seeing beyond the surface, Marcus countered, his glass meeting hers with a crystal chime. As they talked deep into the night, sharing stories of their worlds, their work, their dreams, neither realized they were being watched from the shadows. Chancellor Drix observed their easy interaction with growing concern. A human developing. A relationship with the princess was dangerous enough, but a human who saw past her disabilities to her true potential? That could upset the careful political balance he'd spent years constructing. In her chambers later that night, Vera lay in her bed listening to the night sounds of the palace, the soft humming of energy cores, the distant whispers of court. Life settling down. But her mind was entirely occupied with thoughts of Marcus Chun, the human who had worked beside her as an equal, who had spoken to her as a person rather than a tragedy. For the first time in years, Princess Vera fell asleep, with a smile on her face, unaware that her life was about to become infinitely more complicated and infinitely more beautiful. The morning sun cast prismatic light through the crystal windows of the palace medical wing as Marcus adjusted the calibration on his bioscanner for the third time. 3 weeks had passed since his arrival on Nexithia, and what had begun as a standard diplomatic medical exchange had evolved into something far more profound and complicated. The resonance frequency is still off. Princess Vyra observed from her position beside the treatment table, her fingers dancing through the energy field of a healing crystal array Marcus had helped her design. Your human technology operates on different wavelengths than our biocrystals. Marcus paused in his work, watching how naturally she manipulated energies he could barely comprehend. How do you know? The scanner readings look normal to me. A smile played at the corners of her mouth. I can feel the discord. It's like... She paused, searching for the right analogy, like hearing a musician play slightly out of tune. The melody is there, but something's not quite harmonious. Over the past weeks, Marcus had grown accustomed to Vera's unique perceptions. What had initially seemed like mystical nonsense now revealed itself as a sophisticated understanding of energy patterns that his instruments could barely detect. She experienced the world through vibrations, electromagnetic fields, and bioenergetic signatures in ways that made his advanced human technology seem primitive by comparison. Try adjusting the phase variance by 0.7 degrees, she suggested, her hand moving to demonstrate the proper energy flow. Marcus made the adjustment and immediately saw the difference in his readings. Perfect. How do you do that? Years of practice and necessity, Vera replied, then added more softly, and lately, inspiration. Their eyes met, or rather, his met hers, for though she couldn't see him, there was something in her expression that suggested she was looking directly into his soul. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities, until the sound of approaching footsteps shattered the intimate atmosphere. Princess Vera. Chancellor Drix's voice cut through the air like sharpened ice. The tall, imposing Nexithian entered the medical chamber with deliberate authority, his dark robes rustling against the crystal floor. I wasn't expecting to find you here, again. Chancellor, Vera replied coolly, not moving from her position beside Marcus. I'm supervising important medical research. Surely the advancement of healing techniques serves the kingdom's interests? Drix's pale eyes fixed on Marcus with unconcealed disapproval. Indeed, though I question whether such intimate collaboration is necessary for medical advancement. Marcus felt tension coil in his shoulders, but maintained his professional demeanor. He'd encountered prejudice before, but Drix's hostility felt particularly sharp. Chancellor, our research has already yielded significant breakthroughs in bioregenerative therapy. The princess's insights have been invaluable. I'm sure they have, Drix replied, his tone suggesting quite the opposite. However, I've received concerning reports about the nature of these collaborations. Daily private sessions, extended conversations, rumors of improper ... familiarity. Vera's hand stilled on the crystal controls, and Marcus could sense her anger building like a gathering storm. Improper familiarity, Chancellor? Are you suggesting that a princess of Nexithia is incapable of maintaining appropriate boundaries? I'm suggesting Drix replied carefully, "that your condition may make you vulnerable to manipulation by those who would seek to advance their position through personal relationships with royalty." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus felt his own anger flare, but before he could respond, Vera spoke with deadly calm. "My condition, Chancellor? Please be specific. Are you referring to my blindness, which allows me to perceive energy patterns no sighted Nexithian can detect? Or perhaps my paralysis, which has never prevented me from excelling in mathematics, languages, political theory, and medical arts? Or maybe you're referring to my intelligence, which apparently threatens those who prefer their princesses decorative and compliant." Drix's skin flushed darker, a sign of agitation in Nexithians. "Your Highness, I meant no disrespect. Of course." "You didn't," Vera interrupted, maneuvering her chair to face him directly. "You merely meant to remind me of my place, to suggest that any man showing genuine interest in my mind, rather than my title, must have ulterior motives. Because clearly, no one could value me for myself." Marcus stepped forward, unable to remain silent. "Chancellor, with respect, I've worked with medical professionals across 12 different systems. Princess Vera's diagnostic abilities and energy manipulation skills are extraordinary by any standard. My interest in her insights is purely professional." Even as he said it, Marcus knew it wasn't entirely true anymore. His interest in Vera had grown far beyond professional admiration, but he wasn't about to admit that to someone who clearly saw him as a threat. Drix studied them both with calculating eyes. "Of course, professional interest." He paused meaningfully. "I trust it will remain so. The princess's eventual marriage will be a matter of significant political importance to our kingdom. Personal distractions could prove costly." After the Chancellor departed, Vera remained silent for several minutes, her hands clenched in her lap. Marcus wanted to comfort her, but wasn't sure how to navigate the complex etiquette of consoling an alien princess. "He's not entirely wrong," Vera finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "About what?" "About my marriage being politically important, about my condition making me vulnerable." She turned toward him, and again Marcus had the unsettling sensation that she was seeing him clearly despite her blindness. "About the complications of personal involvement." Marcus moved closer, kneeling beside her chair, so they were at eye level. "Vira, may I speak freely?" She nodded, and he noticed she didn't correct him for using her name without title, something that would have scandalized the court. "In my culture, we have a saying, 'The only disability in life is a bad attitude.' You have the sharpest mind I've ever encountered, the kindest heart, and abilities that border on miraculous. Any man who can't see that isn't worthy of you. Politics be damned." Vera's breath caught, and for a moment her composed facade cracked. "You don't understand the pressures of royal life, Marcus. Every decision I make affects thousands of people. My personal happiness is a luxury I may not be able to afford." "Maybe," Marcus said quietly, "but that doesn't mean you should settle for someone who sees you as a burden to be tolerated rather than a treasure to be cherished." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Vira reached out, her fingers finding his face with gentle precision, tracing the line of his jaw, the curve of his lips. "You're dangerous, Marcus Chun." "How so?" "You make me hope for things I thought were impossible." Before either could say more, the medical chamber doors chimed with an incoming priority message. Zoran, the palace's chief healer, appeared in holographic form, his expression troubled. "Princess Vera, forgive the interruption, but we have a situation. Young Lord Kess has been injured in a crystal riding accident. The injuries are severe spinal trauma and energy burns. We need your expertise with bioenergetic healing, and—" He paused, glancing at Marcus, perhaps the human's advanced surgical techniques. Vera was already moving, her chair gliding toward the emergency treatment area. Prep Chamber 3. Zoran, Marcus, are you willing to assist? Of course. What followed was the most intense medical procedure Marcus had ever participated in. Lord Kess, barely 18 cycles old, had suffered devastating injuries that would have been fatal without immediate intervention. While Zoran and his team worked to stabilize the patient's energy matrices, Marcus and Vera collaborated on repairing the spinal damage. I can feel the neural pathways, Vera explained as her hands moved in complex patterns above the young lord's spine. But I need you to guide the microsurgery. Your instruments can reach places my energy manipulation cannot. Tell me what. You're sensing, Marcus replied, his hands steady as he operated microscopic surgical tools with cybernetic precision. Inflammation here. She guided his instruments to the precise location. And severed connections ... there. The energy flow is completely disrupted. Working together, they spent 6 hours meticulously repairing damage that either of their medical traditions would have deemed irreparable. Marcus's technological precision, combined with Vera's energy manipulation, created something entirely new, a hybrid healing technique that restored not just physical function, but enhanced it. When Lord Kess finally opened his eyes and moved, his legs for the first time since the accident, the assembled medical team stood in awed silence. How? Zoran asked, his voice filled with wonder. Collaboration, Vera replied simply, exhaustion evident in her voice. Human precision and Nexithian energy work. Marcus showed me possibilities I'd never considered. As the medical team dispersed, and Lord Kess was moved to recovery, Marcus found himself alone with Vera in the now quiet chamber. She looked drained but radiant, her hair slightly disheveled from hours of intense concentration. You're incredible, he said softly. What? We did tonight. That was beyond medicine. That was art. Vera laughed, a sound both tired and exhilarated. What we did tonight was prove that assumptions about limitations are often wrong. Yours and mine. What do you mean? I assumed human technology was crude and impersonal. You assumed Nexithian. Healing was mystical nonsense. Together, we created something neither of us could have achieved alone. She paused, her expression growing serious. It makes me wonder what other assumptions we've been making. Marcus understood her meaning immediately. The attraction growing between them had been carefully unspoken, buried beneath professional courtesy and cultural barriers. But tonight, working in perfect harmony, touching minds if not bodies, those barriers had felt suddenly fragile. Vera. He began, then stopped, unsure how to voice feelings that could complicate both their lives. I know, she said quietly. I feel it too. This connection between us, it's not just professional admiration, is it? No, he admitted, it's not. She reached out, and he took her hand without hesitation. Her fingers were warm, and surprisingly strong, and he could feel the slight tremor that revealed her nervousness. This is dangerous, she whispered. I know. The court will never accept it. My father has political alliances to consider. Drix will do everything in his power to separate. U.S. I know. And you still ... Marcus brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm. Vera, in the past 3 weeks, you've challenged everything I thought I knew about healing, about strength, about what makes a person truly beautiful. If that's dangerous, then I'll take the risk. Tears gathered in her unseeing eyes, the first time he'd seen her cry. No one has ever spoken to me like that, like I'm worth the risk. You're worth any risk, he said with quiet conviction. As if drawn by invisible force, they leaned toward each other. Their first kiss was tentative, exploratory, a question asked and answered without words. When they parted, both were breathing unsteadily. Well, Vera whispered, her fingers still intertwined with his. I believe we've just made this situation significantly more complicated. Probably, Marcus agreed, smiling despite the uncertainty ahead, but also significantly more beautiful. Outside in the corridor, Chancellor Drix withdrew from the shadows where he'd been observing, his expression dark with calculation. The human's influence over the princess was growing stronger than he'd anticipated. Drastic measures would soon be necessary to protect the kingdom's political interests and his own carefully laid plans. But within the medical chamber, Marcus and Vera remained lost in each other's presence, two souls from different worlds discovering that love, like the healing they practiced together, could transcend every limitation except those they chose to accept. The royal announcement chamber had never felt so suffocating. Princess Vera sat rigidly in her hover chair, her hands folded carefully in her lap to hide their trembling, as Queen Thesa's voice echoed off the crystal walls with the finality of a death sentence. The betrothal between Princess Vera of Nexithia and Prince Charon of Kalos is hereby officially announced. The ceremony will take place at the next crystal convergence 6 weeks hence. The assembled court erupted in polite applause, but Vera heard only the thundering of her own heartbeat. Beside her, she could sense Marcus's presence in the delegation seating area, could feel his shock and pain as clearly as if it were her own. For 2 months, they had worked together, grown closer, shared stolen moments of conversation and increasingly intimate touches. Now, in a single proclamation, her mother had shattered any hope of a future together. "Your Majesty," Vera said, her voice cutting through the courtly murmurs with icy precision. "I was not consulted on this arrangement." Queen Thesa's expression remained serene, but her tone carried unmistakable authority. "Consultation was unnecessary, daughter. Prince Charon is an excellent match, politically advantageous, wealthy, and willing to overlook your limitations, in exchange for access to our crystal technology." The phrase "willing to overlook" hit Vera like a physical blow. In the delegation seating, she heard Marcus's sharp intake of breath and knew he'd caught the insult as well. Furthermore, the Queen continued, "Prince Charon has specifically requested that all foreign delegations conclude their business and depart within the week. He feels that outside influences have become disruptive to court harmony." The meaning was crystal clear. Marcus and his team were being dismissed, and Vera was being isolated from any support that might encourage her to resist the arrangement. "I see," Vera replied, her voice dangerously quiet. "And if I refuse this generous offer?" Queen Thesa's facade cracked slightly. "You will not refuse, Vera. You are a princess of Nexithia, and you will fulfill your duty to the crown." "My duty?" Vera repeated slowly, then suddenly laughed a sound devoid of humor that made several courtiers step back nervously. "My duty. For 24 cycles, I've been told my duty is to be invisible, to be grateful for any scraps of attention, to accept that my worth lies only in what political advantages I can provide. Well, Mother, I'm afraid I must decline this particular duty." The Queen's pale skin flushed with anger. "Vera, no." The princess rose from her chair, something she rarely did in public, relying instead on mechanical supports built into the throne-like mobility device. Standing on legs that couldn't feel the crystal floor beneath them, supported by nearly invisible biomechanical braces, she faced her mother with defiant dignity. "I refuse this marriage. I refuse to be traded like a commodity to a prince who sees my disabilities as conveniences. And I refuse to pretend any longer that I don't know my own heart." The court held its collective breath. Public defiance of royal decree was unprecedented, particularly from someone in Vera's position. "Your heart?" Queen Thesa's voice was deadly. "Quiet. And where, pray tell, does your heart lead you?" Vera turned toward the delegation seating area, her unseeing eyes finding Marcus with unerring accuracy. "To someone who sees strength where others see weakness." To someone who values my mind over my political connections. To someone who makes me feel whole. Marcus stood slowly, knowing that this moment would change everything. The entire court turned to stare at him, and he felt the weight of their judgment, their shock, their disdain. But looking at Vera brave, brilliant, beautiful Vera, none of that mattered. "Princess," he said formally, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber, "your friendship and collaboration have been the honor of my life." "Friendship?" she asked, a challenge in her voice that made his heart race. Marcus took a deep breath, knowing he was about to irrevocably alter both their destinies. "No, Your Highness, not friendship, love." The word fell into the silence like a stone into still water, sending ripples of shock throughout the assembled nobility. Queen Thesa's face went white with fury, while Chancellor Drix looked grimly satisfied, as if Marcus had just walked into a carefully prepared trap. "Impossible," the Queen declared. "A human? A commoner? Vera, you will cease this ridiculous display immediately." "I will not," Vera replied, her voice ringing with conviction. "I choose Marcus Chun. I choose love over politics, genuine connection, over convenient arrangement, and my own happiness over everyone else's expectations." "You choose exile," Queen Thesa spat, "because that is what this defiance will bring you. Disgrace, banishment, and loss of everything you've ever known." "Then so be it," Vera replied, though Marcus could see the pain her bravery cost her. "I would rather live in exile with someone who loves me than in a palace with someone who merely tolerates me." The confrontation was interrupted by the arrival of Prince Jarin himself, who had been observing from the chamber's upper balcony. He descended the crystal steps with measured grace, his emerald-scaled skin gleaming in the prismatic light. Unlike the shocked courtiers, he appeared almost amused by the dramatic scene. "Your Majesty," he addressed Queen Thesa with a respectful bow, "perhaps I might speak with the princess privately?" "Prince Jarin," the Queen began, "please forgive my daughter's outburst. She's clearly been influenced by inappropriate associations." "On the contrary," Jarin interrupted gently, "she's been influenced by her heart, a quality I find ... refreshing." He approached Vera with genuine courtesy, bowing deeply before her. "Chair. Princess Vera, I've heard remarkable things about your recent medical innovations. Your collaboration with the human delegation has produced healing techniques that could revolutionize medicine across multiple systems." Vara looked puzzled by his unexpected tone. "Prince Jarin, please, let me finish," he said kindly. "I came to Nexithia prepared to fulfill a political obligation. I expected to find a princess who needed protection, guidance, perhaps sympathy for her unfortunate circumstances." He paused, glancing at Marcus before returning his attention to Vera. "Instead, I find a woman whose strength humbles me, whose intelligence challenges me, and whose heart clearly belongs to another." The court gasped collectively. This was not the script anyone had expected. "Your Highness?" Vera asked carefully. Jarin smiled, and Marcus realized the prince was genuinely pleased by this turn of events. "Princess, I am the third son of Kalos. I have 2 older brothers who will inherit before me, and I've spent my life seeking purpose beyond political marriages. Your passion for healing, your innovative spirit, these inspire me. But they also make it clear that forcing you into loveless marriage would be a waste of extraordinary potential." He turned to address the entire court. "I formally withdraw my petition for Princess Vera's hand. Furthermore, I propose that Nexithia and Kalos establish a medical research alliance, with Princess Vera and her chosen partner leading joint healing initiatives across our systems." Queen Thissa looked apoplectic. "Prince Jarin, surely you don't mean to encourage this madness?" "Your Majesty, I mean to encourage greatness wherever I find it. And I believe your daughter has found something truly remarkable, both." in her innovations and in her choice of partner. Chancellor Drix stepped forward, his expression dark with barely controlled rage. This is preposterous. A human cannot be considered as a consort to Nexithian royalty. The bloodline requirements alone are archaic traditions that serve no modern purpose. Prince Jarin interrupted smoothly. Love, capability, and mutual respect serve far better foundations for partnership than genetic compatibility charts. Vera felt tears of gratitude threatening to spill over. Someone was defending her right to choose her own path, but she knew the battle was far from over. "Thank you, Prince Jarin," she said formally, then turned back to her mother. "Queen Thisa, I stand by my choice. I will not marry for political convenience. I will marry for love, or I will not marry at all." "Then you choose to abdicate your position," the queen replied coldly, "because I will not sanction this union." "If that's what it takes," Vera replied, though Marcus could hear the heartbreak in her voice. Nexithia was her home, her people, her life's work. Losing it all for love was a sacrifice almost too great to contemplate. Marcus stepped forward, his heart breaking for the impossible choice she was being forced to make. "Your Majesty, if I may." "You may not," Queen Thisa snapped. "You have caused enough disruption to this family and this kingdom. Guards, escort the human delegation from the palace immediately." "Mother, no!" Vera cried out, panic filling her voice. But Drix was already signaling to the palace guards, and Marcus knew that resistance would only make things worse for Vera. As the guards approached, he caught her hand briefly. "This isn't over," he whispered urgently. "I won't give up on us." "Neither will I," she replied, her fingers clinging to his for one desperate moment before the guards separated them. As Marcus was escorted from the chamber, the last sound he heard was Vera's voice, clear and strong despite her tears. "I will find a way, Marcus Chun. I will find a way to choose love." Outside the palace walls, as his shuttle prepared for departure, Marcus looked back at the crystal spires that housed the woman who had irrevocably changed his life. Somewhere within those walls, Princess Vera was fighting the greatest battle of her life, not against external enemies, but against the expectations and traditions that sought to trap her in a life without love. But he had seen her strength, her determination, her brilliant mind at work. If anyone could find a way to rewrite destiny itself, it would be the princess who had already proven that the greatest limitations were those imposed by others narrow. Vision. The shuttle engines engaged, carrying him away from Nexithia, but not from hope. This separation was just another obstacle to overcome, another problem to solve together. And Princess Vera of Nexia had taught him that the impossible was simply another word for not yet accomplished. In her chambers that night, Vera sat alone in the darkness that was her permanent companion, planning. Love had awakened something in her that years of political maneuvering never had, the absolute determination to fight for her own happiness. Tomorrow, she would begin the most important campaign of her life, proving that a blind, paralyzed princess could indeed choose her own destiny. And in the depths of space, aboard a diplomatic vessel, carrying him away from everything he'd come to value, Marcus Chon made his own silent vow. He would return to Nexithia, and when he did, he would be worthy of the extraordinary woman who had given him her heart. The game, as they say, was far from over.